Hi friends, and welcome to my boss tier list video. I'm going to be talking about every single boss encounter in StellarBlade, and there's 28 of them, so let's get started right away. First, we have the tutorial boss Brute. Brute is a C tier boss for me, not because he's a bad boss, it's just that I'm so high on all the other bosses, he's got to be a step below. What can I say about him? I like his design, he's pretty cool. He has like sock'em boppers for hands, or giant bowling balls, and you get to fight alongside Tachy during this tutorial boss. The whole open mission is pretty cool because it's pretty epic, I should say, because you get thrown into war right away. The music is incredible, it's emotionally charged. You see a bunch of comrades dying, kind of like in the beginning of Nier Automata. And yeah, it's just a great time. It's a great way to start the game. I think that ultimately, Brute is just a decoy for the true threat, which shows up in the very next cutscene after you fail or beat the boss, because you can just die to Brute, similar to like the beginning of Demon's Souls, or the beginning of Sekiro for that matter, which this game is very inspired by. You do not have to kill the tutorial boss. So that's Brute. And following him up, we have Abaddon 1 when we get to Eidos 7. Now, this boss is pretty nostalgic just because, he's in the demo. You face him for a bit longer. It's not like so short like Brute. The first time I faced Brute, I just died. And, you have to kill Abaddon. So you're going to spend more time on him naturally. And so I feel like more people will have fond memories of Abaddon. His theme song is also very badass. He's going to be a B tier boss for me. The whole lightning theme, his design is sick. He has two swords. His attacks are pretty cool. I like how it's the first boss with two phases as well, which teaches you that, okay, the bosses transition, they have different attacks, and in some cases, their attacks vary from phase 1 to phase 2, so it might have like an extra hit. Something that was a 3-string is a 4-string now, and that's all good and fun. After that, we run into Corruptor, which is another C-tier boss. Corruptor feels like a jobber boss, and in a lot of ways he is because you face him 3 times. But Corruptor comes in, you don't expect him. You're just like leaving the Hall of Records and then suddenly, oh, we have a boss fight? Okay. He's only a 1-phase boss, and he has some interesting attacks. Like he has projectiles which are fun because they feel like almost like hit scan. They're so fast. Every time I die to Corruptor, it's to the projectiles. He also has some interesting, like he has the fountain attack where he just drops acid all over the place that can hurt you even on the floor. So he's a fun boss. The parries are a little bit harder for me because he doesn't have any limbs, so you just have to pay attention to the body movements. But once you get him down, you realize that he has a very small moveset. He can charge at you. He has like 2 strings, a 1-string where he comes straight down, and then his 3-string where he just moves his head back and forth. But not bad. Okay, next we have Gigas, which is an A-tier boss. Now, Gigas is awesome. He's, I think, clearly inspired by the Guardian Ape in Sekiro, and I'm going to be making some comparisons to Sekiro because we just played it on stream. We did a full playthrough not that long ago, and so I see the similarities. He has some similar attacks, some similar movements, and I think that I think that Gigas is just a really cool boss because he's so expressive in his attacks. He's got this one blink attack where if you dodge the blink, he is very visibly frustrated and you can see his anger. Like he kind of shakes his hands and he also pounds his chest sometimes. So it just makes for a really fun boss fight. He also is so big that he doesn't even fit on the screen. So it's the first boss, like the first Alpha Naytiba, that makes you feel like, whoa, this game is epic, It's similar to like Abaddon in that sense, because Abaddon comes in, it's raining, he's got that whole atmosphere going on, the whole mood of just like, whoa, this is clearly a boss fight. Similar to Gigas, but just in a different light. It's daytime, he drops in from the sky. He wasn't just there waiting for you like Abaddon. And I think that he's really fun to fight. I like his strings. He's got that one cool 5-string where he jumps into the air. And overall, yeah, he's just an awesome boss. I love his theme song as well. Okay, moving on. Now we have Quiel. Now, Quiel is a mini-boss, but she's a pretty cool one because she teaches you about balance. I feel like some people up to this point may not have even realized you can get retributions on bosses. But Quiel, she has a 6-string that if you parry all of it, she will, she'll get a retribution. And the thing is that she restores her balance and her shields for that matter if you do not get the retribution. So it kind of forces you, it teaches you to like, oh, I should work on that balance bar. Still, it's going to be a C-tier boss. So I like Quiel, but it's a pretty short boss fight. It's just a mini boss. Moving on to Maelstrom 1, another C-tier boss. I do love the whole Abyss and Altesse Lavoir areas. You know, they're really fun and they force you to use your gun. Some players may just forget about their gun. So I like how Shift Up has that variety where you're kind of like in a horror setting. You have to, you remember that your gun exists because it's all you have. And it's fun. It forces you to experiment. You know, you can mess around with the different ammos. It's a pretty good time. You can also use the remote mines in the area. So you're not completely limited to the gun, but pretty much. In some ways, he's kind of like a gimmick boss because all you got to do is shoot his weak points. But, there's some stuff to do. Like he'll drop projectiles all over the place. He has the bodies, like the body bags that will crawl towards you, which also give you ammo so you can't get screwed. But I think that my favorite thing about Maelstrom is just his theme song. His theme song is like top 5 in the game for me. The Maelstrom boss fight music is fantastic. Afterwards, we have some of the rematches, or like the inner bosses. So we've got like Brute 2 here, which you can run into in the Wasteland if you do some side questing. Brute 2 is a step above Brute 1 for me. So I think they changed enough that he deserves to be a whole tier above. Now, what a badass boss fight. First of all, tied to a quest, so you know ahead of time it's going to be a boss fight, which builds some anticipation. And then you pull up and you're suddenly like descending into the northern cave at the end of Final Fantasy VII, where it's like, damn, what's down here? And then you realize, oh, this is the boss arena. So it's a pretty cool boss arena. It's exclusive just to Brute. You don't fight anything else in there. It's just Brute. And, he's got a lot of fire attacks now, a bunch of fire unblockables. He has some very acrobatic attacks that it shouldn't look like Brute can do them, but our boy's actually he's pretty majestic in the air. He's pretty smooth with it. So I like this boss fight. All the fire kind of reminds me of Axel in Kingdom Hearts 2 a little bit. And you get to hear his theme song for longer. This time you can't just fail to Brute. You do have to kill Brute to progress. So I like this one. I think it's a whole step above. Very fun boss fight. Now for Corruptor 2, they didn't change anything. It's the exact same moveset. He's just yellow. So it's not going to jump up a tier like Brute did. I think it's kind of cool how you just run into him randomly. I wasn't really expecting it because, you're exploring the scrap plains area of the wasteland. You might have just helped out Digger, you freed him, and then it's like, oh, it's Corruptor. But it's the exact same moveset. Everything's the same. So not much to say about him. Not as good of a refight as Brute 2. Like I would call Brute 2 Brute Inner, but this is not an inner version of Corruptor. It's just the same thing. Now, what is an inner version, an awesome refight, is Gigas 2. And I think that Gigas 2, also A tier, Gigas 2 is so cool because it's the only rematch where it's clearly the same Gigas. He has the exact same damage to his head. And, now he's pissed. So this boss fight was really cool. He's also in his own secluded little area of the wasteland behind, a big fence, essentially. They gave him some new attacks. He's a lot of fun to fight. It's just more of Gigas. And he mixes it up too. So some of the strings that you were familiar with from the previous one are different now. Kind of like his 5-string where he ends in a jump. This time he ends in an unblockable move. So if you were used to parrying that, well, guess what? It's unblockable now. So you gotta learn some new muscle memory for him. And yeah, it was just a fun boss fight. I love Gigas. So another A tier boss for me. Next we have Stalker, which has a lot of nostalgia tied to him. So it's hard not to rank him higher, but he is a B tier boss in my opinion. It was the original boss challenge boss. I think everyone that played the demo faced Stalker a billion times because it's so much fun to fight. And when I heard his theme song, I was like, oh my goodness, this game is incredible. Not only have we got like epic and Nier Automata style music, we've got music like this too. So I really enjoyed listening to his theme song over and over back when the demo came out. I love Stalker. He taught me how to play, basically. I got to experiment with so many things with him, but he isn't on the same tier as Gigas for me, as well as the other A tier bosses, so I think that B is a great spot for him. Still, amazing boss. I love fighting him. I also have to thank Stalker for teaching me how to parry projectiles, because it was only through experimenting in the demo that I realized, oh, those rocks are actually not unblockable. Because he's got the big rocks, which you'll see the yellow circle, you can't parry those, but then all the small ones, you can parry them, and it feels very cool, especially when combined with like counter 1, which you can use to get in on him from a distance. So again, great boss fight, love Stalker. Continuing through Matrix 11, now we have Juggernaut, another B tier boss for me. I think his theme song is sick. It reminds me of the Batman Beyond intro. I think it's really cool how the game introduces you to Skullings, and then you face like the King Skulling, kind of like a Davy Jones type situation. It also looks like he's wearing a father mask from Dark Souls 1 a little bit. So I like that. I like his hammer. I like the kill animation. It looks really cool. Eve killing him with his own weapon looks amazing. And I think that it's also interesting how he's one of the few bosses where it's not really a parry boss. A lot of his attacks are unblockable, so it's a different dynamic compared to some of the other bosses, especially compared to Stalker, which came just before, which is a lot of parrying. So yeah, I like Juggernaut. The fire is cool. You can take damage from the fire, and yeah, it just teaches you how to dodge more. One of the first bosses where I really like having reflex boost. Like I researched reflex boost for easier perfect dodging in the speedrun right before this guy. And then at the end of Matrix 11, we have one of the most epic bosses in the entire game, which is Tachy, S tier. Now, I feel like Juggernaut would almost be a tier higher if he didn't get overshadowed so soon, because within minutes after Juggernaut, you're facing Tachy, and what a boss fight. I mean, first of all, the first 3-phase boss, I think the only boss in the game where you actually change arenas after phase 2, like in a Tekken stage, you crash through the floor and suddenly you're fighting somewhere else. But her design, incredible. The way she approaches you really calmly just shows how confident she is. The one winged angel vibe going. Actually, speaking of Sephiroth, her sword is also very long. Reminds me of Sephiroth's sword a little bit. I love the helmet with the skull. When she puts it on and she's like, suiting up, looks awesome. Really fun to fight as well. Cool strings that you can learn to parry, and it's a satisfying boss once you learn it. So yeah, I think that Tachy, amazing. I love this fight. I love the cutscene before and after. Also a cool cutscene like in between, like so in the middle of the fight after phase 2, you've got another cutscene there. Not many bosses have that. So a really enjoyable one. Easy S tier, easy. Also, because the fight is emotionally charged, since you're fighting your mentor, it feels more special and memorable that way. Kind of reminds me of the owl fights in Sekiro, specifically the second one, Owl Father. Even the arena, I mean the colors, like in Sekiro, you're facing Owl inside of like a burning building. Here you're in Matrix 11, which is all orange. So the vibe is a little bit similar to me. Even some of the attacks, I mean, Tachy, some of her overhead attacks remind me of the overhead attacks that Owl does. And Owl also approaches you really slowly, kind of like Tachy does. So yeah, I love those fights. I love both of them. They're great. Next up, we have Shael, which I prefer slightly over Quiel. She's a little bit more fun to fight because she's got an extra string, and the string that she does in the second half of her life bar is a bit longer. It took me a while to learn. I still don't got it down perfectly. And I maybe also prefer Abyss slightly more than Altesse. So for that reason, just by association, I think that I enjoy this mini boss a little bit more. Next up, we have Maelstrom 2. Also goes into C tier behind Maelstrom 1. The same amazing music, so that's great, but otherwise the same exact boss. You've got 2 more weak points to shoot. I mean, I like Abyss a little bit more, so I kind of prefer this guy just again by association, because Abyss Lavoir has incredible music. It's got fun platforming. It's got, it's got a little bit more stuff going on for it than in Altesse, and you get kind of jump scared a little bit more, so I like Abyss. And these bosses are fine. I don't mind them. I like that there's a variety in the game with the gunplay. But as far as a boss fight goes, not that much to say. Next up, we have the desert optional bosses. So Behemoth here is a B tier boss for me. I think that Behemoth's pretty cool. I like how he gets his own theme song. I like how, similar to Corruptor, you could randomly encounter the lesser behemoths beforehand. Now with Corruptor, you're forced to encounter a dozer, so the game does teach you some of Corruptor's moveset and like some of the movements that he does before facing Corruptor. With this, technically you could never encounter a lesser behemoth and jump into this boss fight, but if you're exploring the desert, if you're doing side quests, which this guy's tied to a quest, you probably ran into a lesser behemoth, so it's not a shocker when you face him, but he is way bigger, and he's pretty cool. He's got that charge move that reminds me exactly of in Kingdom Hearts 1, how Simba has that charge move that he does and he roars, but he does that same thing. It looks awesome. He also has cool grab animations. If you get grabbed by his blink attacks, Eve gets shoot up and it looks really nice. I also feel like there was potential for a cool rematch with some lesser behemoths in the arena. Maybe like 1 big behemoth and 2 little ones. That'd be a lot of fun. And it reminds me of in God of War 1 on PS2. After you beat the game, you could unlock this arena mode where you could choose what enemies you want to face, how many of them. You could max out your health and magic and make them infinite. And it was just a blast messing around with that. So maybe someday we'll see a rematch with Behemoth. I would like to see him fleshed out a little bit more. Next up, we have Abaddon 2, and what a cool rematch. First of all, awesome design. I love how he's sunburned because, our boy Abaddon only hangs out on rooftops. I guess so that he can call upon his lightning. It makes sense. And, he's out in the desert, so, Naytibas, they don't use sunblock. So yeah, he's looking red. I love how they remixed some of his attacks, specifically his projectiles. In the first fight, he really only does that one horizontal shockwave, but in this one, he's got vertical shockwaves and stuff, and it really catches you off guard if you're used to the first fight, which a lot of people would be very familiar with Abaddon 1 if they played through the demo a lot. So that kind of remix is really fun. I also like how you get more time to enjoy his theme song since it's a longer boss fight than Abaddon 1. He's got a bigger health bar. Another cool thing about Abaddon 2 is that it's the only rematch where you don't face them right away. So at this stage in the game, when you get to the Great Desert, you might have forgotten about Abaddon's moveset a little bit, so it catches you off guard somewhat. Compared to like Brute 1 versus Brute 2, you finish the tutorial, you go through 807, bam, you're in the wasteland, you could face Brute 2. Right after Gigas, bam, you're in the wasteland, you could face Gigas 2. With Stalker, right after Matrix 11, bam, you're in the desert, you could face Stalker 2. But Abaddon, you jump from 807, you go through all of Matrix 11, and then you get to the Great Desert. So yeah, it's a great rematch, a proper Abaddon inner. Then we have Stalker 2. Now, Stalker 2 is like the only rematch that is somewhat compulsory, because if you want to reactivate power, and if you're on your first playthrough, you're probably exploring, and exploring without the camps kind of sucks. So you probably reactivated power in the desert, so you would have faced this guy. And it's a cool boss fight that I looked forward to, because if you played the demo, at the end of the demo, there was the trailer where you can see that you're fighting Stalker in some kind of sandy area. Speaking of sand, in Matrix 11, he doesn't bury as deep as he does in this, because now he can properly, go underground. So that's pretty cool. I also like how they mixed up his attacks. He's pretty sunburned, but not red like Abaddon 2, but you can see that he's tanned compared to Stalker 1. So yeah, a proper desert Stalker, as always, fun to fight. He's got some new attacks, and again, great time. Moving on to 809, we have another optional boss fight in Corruptor 3. Now this is a cool one. I didn't expect to have a 2v1 boss fight. Maybe somewhat inspired by the Double Guardian Ape fight in Sekiro, but I think that, having the Dozer there with a similar moveset to Corruptor added a really fun dynamic that Corruptor did not have, since its moveset is so primitive and basic. Now that we've got two enemies, it really mixes up the fight. It makes it a lot of fun. You can parry some of Corruptor's projectiles and hit Dozer with them. That's fun. Yeah, overall, good time, but optional, so you might have missed this one. But yeah, Corruptor 3, cool boss fight. And then we finally reach Spire. Now, Spire is like the climax of the game. There's so much cool stuff that happens in Spire. All the boss fights are incredible. And we've got, first, my favorite boss in the entire game, which is Belial. Now, before you encounter Belial, you actually find a note about him, foreshadowing it, and it is called Legionnaire 798's advice. It says, destructive, regenerative, and fast. Belial is different from the others. If you see a red Naytiba with two blades, run. Do not let it catch you, ever. What a cool intro to a boss, but not as cool as the sword surfing. So first you catch a glimpse of Belial in the cutscene, you jump into the hypertube, start sword surfing, my favorite track in the entire game. Suddenly you get ambushed by a Belial, you have this really badass cutscene that leads straight into the boss fight, and it is a short boss fight, so it's not going to be S tier for me, but I'm going to put him at the bottom of A tier. And it gives you a chance to learn his moveset. He has also a ridiculous exit, so this man literally jumps through the roof, which, think about that logistically. Entering through a roof is one thing, but he has to generate enough upward force to jump that high and break through the roof. It's crazy. And it shows you that Belial is pretty smart. Eve just took one of his arms. He knows he cannot fight in the state, so he has to back out, choose his battles wisely, and run it back later. Between Belial 1 and 2, you've got some fun obstacles to overcome. You've got platforming and missile turrets and stuff. But then once you reach Belial 2, wow, what a boss fight. This is my favorite boss in the entire game. He is, first of all, music is awesome. That makes it more fun. The parries are fun to learn. His strings are all very cool. He's got very cool animations when he grabs you. He lived up to the hype. The foreshadowing note, it said that he's destructive, regenerative, and fast. And he regenerates twice. So he's got 3 phases in this. And he also regenerated his entire arm like Piccolo or something, like a Namekian. So the arm that he lost, it's back now. It looks super cool. He's got this bio arm. If you've watched my stream at all, you've heard me talk about how much I love Belial, and that's why. Super fun boss, incredible music, his whole getup, everything is awesome. The build-up, they don't even wait too long. It's like the pacing is perfect, where it's not too long after facing Belial 1 that you run into him again, and the way you kill him is also really cool. So that's Belial 2, my favorite boss. Next up, we have Karakuri, which is a boss that really caught me by surprise. I'm going to go for A tier because I think it's a really cool boss fight. Beautiful arena. Karakuri is pretty smart. She disables the drone, so you cannot use your gun. It's the only boss outside of Brute 1 where you are completely unable to use your drone to shoot. And I really like her strings. I think that the spawns add for a cool dynamic. In the Tachy mode only challenge run that I did on stream, which was a 4-parter, Karakuri was maybe the hardest boss, or Providence. They were both pretty difficult for me. And it's all because of the spawns, running around avoiding them staying alive while I regenerated Tachy mode. So a cool boss, cool design. Also, Karakuri is somehow tied to Anya because Karakuri was the name of the character that Anya played. So I think that she may be wearing like a mask that Anya wore, possibly. I'm not sure. But overall, great boss fight. Caught me by surprise. Love the arena. Love the music too. And especially in phase 2 when that guitar comes in. Sounds great. Next up, we have Democrawler, and wow, what an epic boss. First of all, the build-up is crazy. You've got Everglow playing as you ascend the elevator. You finally make it to the very top. And then you're hit with, after being lulled into this state of like, all right, things are looking up, we're listening to Everglow. Then you're hit with this really demonic boss. You've got opera-style vocals by Pernell, amazing song. And the whole thing reminds me of it feels like a Dark Souls boss with the music, with his attacks. Specifically, he reminded me of Great Lord Nito from Dark Souls 1. So, the Grave Lord Nito, resemblance, the music, and the way he pulls out his sword in phase 2, another 3-phase boss, by the way. Very cool. The timings are weird to learn. I still struggle with this boss. I never got this one down perfectly because the timings are so irregular, and we have some more bosses with irregular timings later. But still super fun boss. It's a little bit easier once you learn that you can jump over almost all of his attacks. A lot of them sweep low, and you can just jump over them, do an aerial string. But it leads into a very cool, not a real boss fight, but we have Demogorgon, which just adds to the cinematic aspect of the Democrawler fight. I'm going to put him in D tier. Demogorgon is not really a boss fight, so this D tier is more like, I don't know, it's more like cinema or something. So I think that these two combined are a great way to cap off the Spire, and, falling through space. The whole thing is just, it feels like, wow, this is the climax of the game. But then there's even more. We have even more awesome boss fights because suddenly we get back to Zion. Zion's on fire. And now we have to fight Unidentified Naytiba. And this is easy S tier for me. I think that the build up to this boss is so amazing because since the demo, you're looking forward to fighting this boss. And, she took out Tachy. You want to get revenge. And you can finally do it. And you're doing it where? You're doing it inside of the Presence Chamber, which you've been in multiple times throughout the game. You see man there slaughtered, basically. Unidentified Naytiba also has really irregular timings and just strange pauses between attacks, which is fun to learn. They also introduced the insta-kill, which is another cool mechanic where you got to shoot some targets, otherwise you just instantly die. You get some time to do it, but you've also got projectiles coming your way. They've also got a variety of projectiles. You got tar pits, you got clouds, you got slow-moving orbs, faster-moving orbs, which you can parry. It's just a fun boss fight, lots of dynamics to it. You get 3 phases of fun, and phase 3 specifically is really badass because of the guitar that comes in on the song. She sprouts 2 more wings. She starts doing even more attacks. And yeah, you always got to stay on your toes against Unidentified Naytiba. She can also parry you. There's only one other boss that can parry you, and it's actually the same boss. It is Raven. So we've got UN in her human form, and this is probably one of the most fun boss fights to replay. Raven has no very weird timings like UN, so it's a lot more fluid. I feel like, all the timings they feel more intuitive. She's got a lot of fast strings, which feel satisfying and fun to parry. 2 phases again, really cool intermission in the middle of the fight where you get some dialogue and a cutscene. And phase 2 is just awesome. I mean, you've got the Tempest attack, which looks cool. It fills the screen with her lasers. She teleports all around. She can parry you. She fakes you out, going from a blink into another blink. It's just a really fun boss fight. Anytime you have a boss that's similar in size to you, similar attacks, it feels like you're on kind of level playing ground, but she has a lot of stuff, and it's a lot to learn, but very satisfying once you do learn her. I have a 30-minute tutorial video it's on studying bosses, but I use Raven as my example. So if you're interested in Raven and you want to learn how to perfect her, check out my video. I'll put it in the description. Then we've got the 2 final bosses. Now, in my first playthrough, I got Adam because I answered no, and I was not expecting to face Adam. It's a cool way to fake you out thinking like, oh, is this it? Is this the final boss? Did I choose the wrong choice and now I'm not going to get a real boss? But no, you do get a real boss. Adam gives you a chance to charge up your energy. He barely has any attacks. He doesn't really do anything. So it is still kind of cool because it's emotionally charged naturally. You don't really want to be facing Adam, who you thought was on your side. But then, you do, and you lead into probably the best. I feel like Elder is the true final boss. For the true ending, it's Providence, but Elder feels more like a final boss to me, so Elder is also going to go into S tier. Now, Elder has so many attacks, a huge variety of attacks, lots of projectiles, a lot to learn. In my opinion, now I think that the hardest boss is always going to be the boss that you're least familiar with. And for me, that would be Elder. It's just a lot to learn and a lot of, again, irregular timings. And some of his attacks just look so similar that it's hard to get a read on them because you've also got very little contrast between the boss and the background. Speaking of which, the whole arena is very epic. It reminds me of Infinite Azure in Tekken 7. How it's just like an infinite stage. You're fighting in the water, and the stuff that he does is really epic. It feels like a final boss compared to Providence, which I'm going to go for A tier, but like the very top of A tier. Providence doesn't feel as much like a final boss. Great music. I love Providence's music. Elder has a very epic song, though, that feels more like, wow, this is the final boss. This is the Elder Naytiba. When you're facing Providence, it's more like, I don't know. I enjoy Providence's fight much more, though, naturally, because there's not as much craziness like with Elder. Like, he doesn't teleport away. He doesn't turn into a wall. And this is from a speedrunning perspective, because facing Elder is a lot more stressful for me. Again, I'm less familiar with him compared to Providence, whereas Providence, we did a whole 7-hour stream just talking about Providence. Well, just trying to beat Providence in my Tachy mode only challenge run. That was a long fight. That was like almost a 15-minute fight of just surviving as Providence to kill him in 3 Tachy mode activations. But I think that Providence has really cool attacks. It's another fun fight where you have to, more than anything, stay away from his lasers and all his projectiles. That's the craziness, right? The smaller the melee-based attacks are more manageable, and so, you know, learning to stay close to him so he doesn't, you know, pull out all the BS is really where Providence shines in a speedrun. But as far as epic feeling, I think Elder gets it, so that's why he's 1 tier above. Another thing to note on Elder is that the way you kill him is really hype. You go into Tachy mode and do an Omni Slash like Cloud, basically, and it looks awesome. Providence, you get him down to 25%, and then you get a cutscene, which is cool, and you turn into, you know, Angel form Eve. Now, depending on the ending you got, something may or may not happen here, but you still face Providence no matter what, and it's satisfying using, you know, this cool hyped up form of Eve. It looks awesome. You got all these cool animations. It's kind of like Tachy mode, but just like more juiced. And after the Providence fight, you also have a little bit of an outro sequence where you're killing angels, or I forget what they're called, but it's kind of like the outro, like the credits scene in DMC3, where you're just facing enemies. I thought that it was an appropriate ending, and I like the satisfaction you get for killing all the angels and doing this big Providence fight and saving, you know, saving Lily and all that. With Elder, you complete your mission, but at what cost? So it's a really somber feeling in comparison. Overall, I definitely think that Elder deserves to be 1 step above just because it feels more like a final boss to me. Although I love Providence. I love facing Providence a lot more than I like facing Elder, but out of respect, I think Elder deserves to be here in S tier. And that is my tier list. Let me know what you think. How would you rank them? Feel free to discuss the bosses in the comment section. I love boss discussion and talking about this game. If you're not in our Safe for Work Discord, it's free to join. Link is in the description. Thank you for tuning into the streams. My stream schedule is in the description if you were curious and you wanted to hang out. I only stream here on YouTube. And yeah, thanks again so much for the support. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.